What's the best joke you know? 3 men were standing before the pearly gates of heaven, when St. Peter came to them and said, "Boys, it's closing time, so I'm going to only let one of you in. Whoever has the best death story can enter." So the first guy starts, "So I came home from work early today because I suspected my wife of cheating on me. I get to my 4th-story apartment and find that my wife is butt naked on our bed, but alone. Of course I am suspicious and start tearing the apartment apart, looking for the dude. I looked everywhere and was about to give up, when I see some fingers hanging on our balcony. So, I start stomping on his fingers, swearing at the dude. But he wouldn't let go. So I go get a hammer and start smashing his dirty little sausages until he finally lets go. I looked over the edge, hoping to find the bastard dead, but he landed in a bush and was alive. So I threw our fridge over the balcony, which ended up killing him. I was so upset my wife was cheating on me though, I went and jumped off the balcony too, and here I am." Peter says, "Hey, that was pretty good. What about you?" As he points to the second guy. "Well, I was working out on the balcony of my 5th-story apartment when I slipped on a banana peel and fell over the edge. I luckily was able to grab onto the ledge of the balcony below me, but I was stuck. I couldn't lift myself up, but I was hanging on for dear life. I was waiting what felt like forever, until finally someone shows up. Finally, I'm saved. But then the dude starts stomping on my fingers and swearing at me. I wasn't going to give up that easy, though, so I hold on until he stops. Just when I think it's all over, he starts smashing my hand with the hammer. I couldn't take it and let go, only to fall in a bush and survive. Just as I was thinking that I was the luckiest man on earth, I look up and a fridge is falling from the sky, and now I am here." Peter says, all right, not bad. Not bad. "Well, what happened to you?" Pointing to the last man, the third guy says, "Get this, I was naked, in a fridge." The husband leans over and asks his wife, "Do you remember the first time we had sex together over 50 years ago? We went behind the village tavern where you leaned against the back fence and I made love to you." "Yes," she says, "I remember it." "Well, okay," he says, "how about taking a stroll around there again and we can do it for old times' sake?" "Oh Jim, you old devil, that sounds like a crazy, but good idea." A police officer sitting in the next booth heard their conversation and, having a chuckle to himself, he thinks to himself, "I've got to see these 2 old-timers having sex against the fence. I'll just keep an eye on them so there's no trouble." So he follows them. The elderly couple walks haltingly along, leaning on each other for support, aided by walking sticks. Finally, they get to the back of the tavern and make their way to the fence. The old lady lifts her skirt and the old man drops his trousers. As she leans against the fence, the old man moves in. Then suddenly they erupt into the most furious sex that the policeman has ever seen. This goes on for about 10 minutes while both are making loud noises and moaning and screaming. Finally, they both collapse, panting on the ground. The policeman is amazed. He thinks he has learned something about life and old age that he didn't know. After about half an hour of lying on the ground recovering, the old couple struggle to their feet and put their clothes back on. The policeman is still watching and thinks to himself, "This is truly amazing. I've got to ask them what their secret is." So, as the couple passes, he says to them, "Excuse me, but that was something else. You must have had a fantastic sex life together. Is there some sort of secret to this?" Shaking, the old man is barely able to reply. 50 years ago that wasn't an electric fence. On their way to get married, a young Catholic couple is involved in a fatal car accident. The couple found themselves sitting outside the pearly gates waiting for St. Peter to process them into heaven. While waiting, they began to wonder, could they possibly get married in heaven? When St. Peter showed up, they asked him. St. Peter said, "I don't know. This is the first time anyone has asked. Let me go find out," and he left. The couple sat and waited. 2 months passed and the couple were still waiting. While waiting, they began to wonder what would happen if it didn't work out. Could you get a divorce in heaven? After yet another month, St. Peter finally returned, looking somewhat bedraggled. "Yes," he informed the couple, "you can get married in heaven." "Great," said the couple, "but we were just wondering, what if things don't work out? Could we also get a divorce in heaven?" Street Peter, red-faced with anger, slammed his clipboard onto the ground. "What's wrong?" asked the frightened couple. "Oh, come on," Street Peter shouted. "It took me 3 months to find a priest up here. Do you have any idea how long it'll take me to find a lawyer? ETA. Thanks for the award, kind stranger. S. This is enough of an excuse to tell my favorite Pearly Gates joke. A plane crashes and a whole bunch of people die at once. St. Peter tells them all to form a single fine line and they will each get one wish before they get into heaven. The very first woman in line asks St. Peter what she could possibly want in heaven, and he assures her she will be met by all of her loved ones and have her every greatest wish once she enters the kingdom of heaven. So since she can't think of anything else, she wishes to be as beautiful as all the angels, so that she'll fit in. St. Peter grants her wish and she heads in. The next guy in line can't think of anything he would need either, so he also wishes to be as beautiful as an angel. This goes on and on halfway through the line, with each person not being able to think of anything, wishing to be as beautiful as the angels, and being admitted to heaven, when St. Peter notices what sounds faintly like a giggle coming from the back of the line. He doesn't think much of it. The next quarter of the line goes by with everyone wishing to be beautiful, and now it's an audible chuckle every few seconds from the back of the line. But St. Peter continues. The chuckle gets louder and louder as each person makes their wish to be beautiful and heads into heaven for all eternity. By the time it's down to the list 10 people in line, it's impossible not to notice the very last guy in line, doubled over, rolling around the ground laughing hysterically. They ignore him as everyone else takes their turn to wish to be as beautiful as the angels and join the kingdom of heaven. A nun is walking down the hall of the parish. She passes another nun who says, "I see you woke up on the wrong side of the bed." The nun is slightly embarrassed and checks over herself to make sure everything is alright. Seeing nothing out of place, she continues walking. She then passes 2 other nuns who say again woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Quickly she goes to the restroom to see if something about her hair was off. Finding nothing out of place, she continues on. As she's walking, she approaches Mother Superior. The nun says, "I know what you're going to tell me. I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, but I don't see anything wrong with me." Mother Superior chuckles and says, "Well, it would explain why you're wearing the priest's shoes." A nun is walking through the park when a man comes running up to her. He says, "Please sister, I need help. May I hide under your skirt?" The nun agrees, and as soon as the man is hidden, a group of soldiers go running by. The man comes out and says, "Thank you so much. I don't want to go to the war. I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you've got a great pair of legs." The nun laughs and says, "If you'd looked a little higher, you'd have seen a great pair of balls. I don't want to go to the war either." So fun tidbit: when normal bicycles, the kind with 2 of the same sized wheels, were new, they were a bit of an empowerment tool for women since their travel was restricted by other means on account of people thinking that speed would cause the uterus to wander about and make them crazy. So women started riding en masse, and one thing that some women would do was adjust the seat so the front end was pointed up by about 30 degrees so that they would receive clitoral stimulation. My grandma always tells this joke and she can never remember the exact wording, and starts falling over laughing halfway through every time. What's the difference between a nun in a pew and a nun in a bathtub? One's got hope in her soul, and the other's got soap in her hole. Whenever she would start telling the joke and you could always tell from a while off, my grandpa would go, "Number, no, M," and try to steer the convo away so people wouldn't think them to be coarse. Father Roberts, a priest, has been suffering from a burning sensation when he urinates. He goes to the doctor and explains what he's feeling. The doctor says, "Okay, Father, let's have a look." The priest stares at the ceiling in agony while the doctor swabs his penis. When finally the doctor yells, "Got it!" in his hand, he shows the priest what the problem was and asks, "But Father, how did you get a peanut stuck in your penis?" The priest, with an angry look, replies, "Those damned altar boys must be stealing Father Flanagan's payday bars again." Credit to Reddit. An American tourist is walking through a small town in Ireland. It's raining, so he thought he'd stop in at a pub for a nice pint in a warm fire. He comes up to this pub and there's an old Irish guy standing outside getting absolutely soaked. What's worse is, he has a fishing pole with the line dropped onto a nearby puddle. The American tourist feels really bad for the old guy and tells him to come inside to the pub and he'll buy him a drink. They're both inside, taking the first swallow of their drinks by a roaring fire. The American, wanting to make small talk with the old guy, asks, "So how many did you catch today?" The old Irish guy, now with a twinkle in his eye, replies, "You're the fourth one today." A Texan was on a trip to Ireland and went onto one of the pubs in a town there. He crashed through the door, strutted right up to the front and proclaimed, "Now I hear ya all are pretty big drinkers here. I have a challenge for any person here. I have $500 for anyone who can down 10 pints of beer in 10 minutes or less." Everyone stared at the Texan for a moment, not saying a word. Nobody stepped forward to accept the Texan's offer. One man even got up and walked out of the bar. About 15 minutes later, a man walked up to the Texan and asked if the bet is still good. It was the man who had walked out of the pub when the challenge was first proposed. The Texan said sure, and 10 pints were lined up for the Irishman. The Texan started his timer, and the man started drinking. Everybody crowded behind him as he began. He downed each of them, one after another, and only 8 minutes later, he was finished. The Texan, surprised, but not angry, handed over the cash to the man. As he did, the Texan asked the Irishman where he went for those 15 minutes. The Irishman replied, "Well gee, I had to go to the pub down the street to see if I could do it first." Similar, an Irishman living in America went down to his local bar and ordered 3 beers. The bartender assumed some friends would be showing up, but the man simply sat there with his 3 beers, slowly drinking one after the other. The next week, the man showed up to the bar and again ordered 3 beers. The bartender was puzzled, but poured the beers and watched the man slowly drink them one after the other. When the man came in again the next week, the bartender couldn't hold back his curiosity anymore. "Why do you order 3 beers at once? If you order them one at a time, they won't go flat." "Well, I have 2 brothers, one in Australia and one back home in Ireland. Since we can't drink in person anymore, each week we go to our local pub and order 3 beers, so it's like we're drinking together." The bartender smiled and nodded at the explanation, and poured the man his 3 beers. This continued for months until one day the man came in, only this time he ordered 2 beers. The bartender's face fell, and as he poured the man his beers he couldn't help asking. A backpacker is traveling through Ireland when it starts to rain. He decides to wait out the storm in a nearby pub. The only other person at the bar is an older man staring at his drink. After a few moments of silence, the man turns to the backpacker and says in a thick Irish accent, "You see this bar? I built this bar with my own bare hands. I cut down every tree and made the lumber myself. I toiled away through the wind and cold. But do they call me McGregor the bar builder? No." He continued, "Do you see that stone wall out there? I built that wall with my own bare hands. I found every stone and placed them just right through the rain and the mud. But do they call me McGregor the wall builder? No." "Do you see that pier out there on the lake? I built that pier with my own bare hands, driving each piling deep into ground so that it would last a lifetime. Do they call me McGregor the pier builder? No." "But yeah, fuck one goat." A German, an American and a Russian are stuck on an island. Local tribe of cannibals took them to the chief. He said that he'll give them freedom if they will succeed in 2 of his tasks. The first task was to collect 10 of the same fruit in the jungle nearby. The first to return was German. He brought 10 oranges. Then chief orders him to stuff them in his asshole, and if German shows any emotion on his face, he'll be killed immediately. He tried to stay calm, but screamed of pain during the 3rd orange, so they killed him. The second one was Russian. He brought berries. He was doing the second task just fine, but, when almost finished, He started laughing uncontrollably, failing the task. So syllables killed him too. Then German meets Russian in heaven. Gee, you've been so close. What happened? I was doing great. Felt no pain at all. But when I started to stuff ninth berry, I suddenly saw an American returning from the jungle. He had the widest smile, while carrying 10 pineapples. I have another one. I'll use the same 3. A German, Russian, and American are captured by cannibals. The chief says he will make a feast of their meat, tools from their bones, and use their skin to make a canoe. However, they get to choose how they die. The German asks to be shot in the heart with an arrow, so death could be instantaneous. The Russian asks to be strangled, so it will be like going to sleep. The American says, "Just give me a fork." The cannibals are puzzled, but oblige. The American starts stabbing himself all over with the fork. So much for your fucking canoe. An American and a Russian both die on the same day and find themselves in hell. Satan informs them that, just as on Earth, hell is divided by national identities, meaning of course that hell has American and Russian, Soviet sectors. The American thinks it over and says, "I was always proud to be an American, so I'll spend my afterlife in American hell." The Russian says, "I lived most of earthly life in Soviet Russia, so I'll go to Soviet hell." Some months later, the American and Russian cross paths. They spend a little time catching up, including asking each other how it is in their respective parts of hell. The American says, "You have to eat a shovelful of shit every day." It was pretty awful at first, but eventually you get used to it. "How is it in Soviet hell?" The Russian answers, "It is just like life in Soviet Union. One day there is no shit, next day there are no shovels." A husband and his wife retire to a cabin off the East Coast. One day the husband tells his wife he's going out to fish for some fresh dinner. He sadly never returns, so she calls the local authorities. A few days later she hears a knock on the door and it's a couple of police officers. They say to her that they have bad news, good news and even better news. Woman: "Well, let's hear the bad news and get it out of the way." Officer: "We've found your husband. He's had an unfortunate accident and he drowned." Woman: "Oh my gosh, that's terrible. How is there any good news to this?" Officer: "Well, luckily he had 10 king crabs and 12 lobsters attached to him." Woman: "And how does this get any better?" Officer: "We're pulling him up again tomorrow." A cowboy gets captured by some Indians, who take him to their tribe. The chief walks up to the cowboy and explains he only has 3 days to live. Desperate to escape, the cowboy asks, "May I speak to my horse?" The chief, who is confused, but sees no harm in it, accepts and brings the cowboy's horse to him. The cowboy whispers in the horse's ear and it runs off. About an hour later, the horse returns with a naked blonde woman. The next day, the chief says to the cowboy, "You have 2 days to live." Cowboy: Still desperate to escape, the cowboy asks if he can talk to his horse. The chief accepts and brings the cowboy's horse to him. The cowboy whispers in the horse's ear, and it runs off again. About an hour later, the horse returns with a naked redhead woman. The following day, the chief says to the cowboy, "You have 1 left to live." The cowboy asks if he can talk to his horse. The chief allows it and brings it to the cowboy, who whispers in its ear. The horse runs off, only to return an hour later with the naked brown-haired woman. In this final day of the cowboy's life, the chief walks up to him and says, "This is your last day." Cowboy, now even more afraid for his life than he already was, he asks if he can speak to his horse again. The chief lets him do it, so the cowboy whispers in his horse's ear, which runs off, only to return an hour later with the naked black-haired woman. The cowboy, who is now extremely angry, grabs his horse by its ears, pulls it closer to his face, and says, "I said, posse." A guy wakes up one morning and he hears a voice inside his head. It says, "Quit your job, sell your house, take all your money and go to Las Vegas." He ignores the voice, but later he hears it again. "Quit your job, sell your house, take all your money and go to Las Vegas." He keeps trying to ignore it, but the harder he tries the more he hears it. Pretty soon he's hearing it constantly. "Quit your job, sell your house, take all your money and go to Las Vegas." So finally he can't stand it anymore. He decides to believe the voice. He quits his job, sells his house, puts all his money in a suitcase and flies to Las Vegas. The moment he gets off the plane, the voice says, "Go to Caesar's Palace." He takes a cab to Caesar's Palace. The voice says, "Go to the roulette wheel." He makes his way back to the roulette wheel. The voice says, "Bet it all on Red 23. He bets every cent he has on Red 23. The wheel spins around. It comes up black 11. The voice says, "Fuck."